Last we checked on St. Paul, he was in Caesarea, visiting with the king and the governor, and it seems like we've been in Caesarea Maritima for a very long time, but it is finally time to leave his imprisonment there and take him to Rome. So we are in Acts chapter 27, and we're going to be following some of this path here that you see throughout the Mediterranean Sea. When it was decided that we were to sail for Italy, and right there, we've got that "we" again, so we know that St. Luke is on this trip with him.
Unless you're Adam Gopnik.
They transferred Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. Embarking on a ship of Adramyttium, which of course, as you know, is a Greek city on the coast of Aeolia. This ship was about to set sail to the ports along the coast of Asia. We put to sea accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and allowed him to go to his friends to be cared for. It's very nice. So the prisoner's being allowed to be taking care of his friends and go visit some people in Sidon, but that's going to come back later to be a really poor decision on the part of Julius. Putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. After we had sailed across the sea that is off of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra and Lycia. So I've got a zoomed in picture right here. You can see the path that we're taking. Of course, they're following the coastline because that's the kind of vessel they're in, and they can't really make it out into the sea very far in that kind of vessel. There the centurion found, so they're in, now we're up in Myra. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship bound for Italy and put us on board. So now we've switched vessels and they're on their way again.
Wait, an Alexandrian ship bound for Italy.
Oh yeah.
I thought before the 20th century, there was this kind of hermetically sealed isolation of every nation from one another. People didn't interact. There were these completely different worlds. There was no globalization. Is that wrong?
It's wrong.
Ah, thank you.
That's a good point. Yeah, so this is a ship from Egypt that is in East Asia headed towards Italy, carrying grain. So yeah, some economic interest going on, and of course, there weren't like passenger ships for people who just wanted to go from one place to another. So people who were, these are Roman military folks who have prisoners, and they're just catching a ride on this grain ship.
How do you know it was a grain ship?
It shows up later in the text. This is what it. This is a replica of what this kind of vessel would have looked like. The sail is furled there, but it's a square sail, just your typical Mediterranean boat from the 1st century. We sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off, I'm going to do terrible with these pronunciations, Cnidus. And as the wind was against us, we sailed under the lee of Crete off Salmone. Sailing past it with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Havens near the city of Lycia. So already we're hearing it's slow going, the winds are against them, it's hard to get to their destination, and they've made it to the island of Crete. Since much time had been lost, and sailing was now dangerous, because even the fast had already gone by. So, just stopping right there, what fast is he talking about? Is it the Lenten fast? Is it?
Did they have Lent back then?
No, I'm joking.
Is it Pentecost?
No, not Pentecost. I think the only annual fast would have been the Day of Atonement. So late September, October-ish. And in that time, for getting around the Mediterranean, it's pretty much understood, like, you do not sail in the winter. It's just not safe to do so. So the fact that Paul has had some time in Sidon to hang out with his friends, they've lost time, they've had these headwinds, they're not able to make it to their destination. Paul is advising the captain, "Sirs, I can see that the voyage will be with danger and much heavy loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives." But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said. Now, why would Paul even have the authority to talk about? How would he know this? Foresight? He's been on a few boats before in the Mediterranean too, right?
But things didn't go so well for him, so...
Fair enough. Since the harbor was not suitable for spending the winter, the majority was in favor of putting to sea from there on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, where they could spend the winter. It was a harbor of Crete facing southwest and northwest. So we've got very specific locations and spots going on, and of course we can look at a map and see where those are. So you can see where Fair Havens is, and then it doesn't look very far away right there, right? It's just like, okay, we're just gonna go from one port to another, and we'll see what happens. Immediately after we got past the island, I saw a great wave from, I saw a great wave from which spray was rising, and I heard a loud roaring sound. The men were so frightened that they loosed hold of their oars, for the whole sea resounding with the rushing of the waters. I'm playing a little bit of a trick on you because this is not actually Acts. I can't keep on doing it, I have to tell you, this is not Acts. But the ship stayed where it was, for the men had left off rowing. I went round, therefore, and exhorted them, man by man, not to lose heart. "My friends," said I, "this is not the first time that we have been in danger, and we are in nothing like so bad a case as when the Cyclops shut us up in his cave. Nevertheless, my courage and wise counsel saved us then, and we shall live to look back on all this as well." The Odyssey. But it just kind of flowed. I had forgotten I did that as I started. I had forgotten I did that. They sound kind of similar, don't they?
Yeah.
So the Odyssey, of course, is a few centuries before. And I'll just finish it, and then I'll continue on with why I put it in. "Now therefore let us all do as I say, trust in Jove, and row on with might and main. As for you, coxswain, these are your orders. Attend to them, for the ship is in your hands. Turn her head away from these steaming rapids and hug the rock, or she will give you the slip and be over yonder before you know where you are, and you will be the death of us." So this, of course, is Odysseus. This is book 12 of the Odyssey. And they have passed the Sirens, and they are about to head between, is it Scylla? Scylla and Charybdis. Odysseus is giving this speech. And so the reason that I bring up the Odyssey is because we are about to hear about a shipwreck that Paul is in. And there is a long history of kind of literature following shipwrecks, you know? It's the maritime narrative. These narratives are a pretty common trope in literature, and it's just like kind of a fascination of mine. So I'm gonna take a little detour and bring us through some shipwreck literature, beginning with the Odyssey, and moving on like through the 20th century. We'll see how quickly we go. And this is partly just because it's fascinating to me. But I also think that shipwrecks and just like maritime nautical stories in general, the reason that they fascinate me is that because a ship, a boat, is in many ways like a microcosm of human society. And like even beginning with Plato, we see that, right? Like Plato in the Republic uses this allegory of the ship of fools, like the ship of state, and talks about how, like, well, I won't get into it, but essentially it just, you have this whole microcosm of society. You've got the leaders, you've got the crew, so many things can go wrong. And then when things do go wrong, as they do a lot out on the sea, you have like a question of how do people react in really life or death situations. So people's characters are revealed in these stories. And so I hope that it will be a worthwhile endeavor and interesting to you as well as interesting it is to me. So a couple questions that I want us to think about as we think about the Odyssey and then moving forward through history. What's causing the storm in this story? Who dies? Who survives? Does anyone die? Does anyone survive? How is the captain? What's the role of the captain? And how is the captain relating to the crew? And then what happens to the vessel in the end? Before we get there, I went real deep into this. So, you might not be able to see very well, but so maritime development, it's helpful to think about because when we think about going on ships now, I mean, if you look at the very end of the timeline, the bottom right, you have, GPS systems, you have radar, you have all of this technology that is helpful when we're going out on the sea. So it doesn't seem that dangerous to us anymore. But of course, that's like from 1900 onward. And if you look at basically prehistory, up until like the medieval period, there's really not all that much innovation when it comes to boats, or sailing in general. And it's really not till we get to the 1400s. Well, the medieval period. So like the compass isn't invented until 1100. I mean, think about just how basic that is to our general sense of navigation. The astrolabe is the late 1400s. That's how you calculate latitude. Then there was this whole problem of calculating longitude, and that didn't happen until 1759. So you just have all of this technology that we take for granted now that just obviously did not exist. And of course, like the invention of maps and charts. This is just kind of reminding us also when you look at the history of seafaring, you're thinking about the history of you can follow the history of the world. So
they use the stars a lot, right?
Celestial navigation, yeah. Which of course, celestial navigation is also using, it can mean kind of two different things. One, celestial navigation can just mean like looking up at the stars and figuring out where you're going, which is what they did in Paul's time, like in the Mediterranean. But even using the sextant and the octant, which is like right in the middle under the Age of Discovery, 1731, that's also celestial navigation. You're also using the sun and the stars to figure out where you're going. So basically all of human history is celestial navigation up until like GPS. So. Okay, so this is continuing on with the Odyssey. For 6 days then, now we've jumped forward a little bit and they've gotten past Scylla and Charybdis, and now they have made it to the island of Zeus's island with the cattle that they are commanded, do not eat this cattle. But of course they ran out of their food, they ran out of their grain and wine, and so here we are. For 6 days then, my trusty comrades feasted on the beast of the kind of Helios, kind being cattle, which they had driven off. But when Zeus, the son of Cronos, brought upon us the 7th day, then the wind ceased to blow tempestuously, and we straightway went on board, and put out into the broad sea, when we had set up the mast and hoisted the white sail. But when we had left that island and no other land appeared, but only sky and sea, then verily the son of Kronos set a black cloud above the hollow ship. The sea grew dark beneath it. She ran on for no long time. Straightway came the shrieking west wind, blowing with a furious tempest. The mast fell backward, all of its tackling was strown. The stern of the ship, the mast, blah, blah, blah. The pilots crushed his bones. Like a diver, he fell from the ship. Therefore Zeus thundered and hurled his bolt upon the ship. She quivered from stem to stern, smitten by the bolt of Zeus, and was filled with sulphurous smoke, and my comrades fell from out of the ship. Like sea crows, they were borne on the waves about the black ship, and the god took from them their returning. But I kept pacing up and down the ship till the surge tore the sides from the keel, and the wave bore her on dismantled and snapped the mast off at the keel, but over the mast had been flung the backstay fashioned of oxide. With this I lashed the two together, both keel and mast, and sitting on these was borne by the direful winds. So what's the cause of this storm? The shrieking west wind. I didn't give you the whole context, but Zeus does not want the people to eat the cattle. So the real cause is Zeus is angry that the people have eaten his cattle and has sent this wind, this strong wind. Who dies? Who survives? Does anyone survive? Who dies? Odysseus is the only survivor. Yeah, I think that basically covers that one. And the vessel is lost, right? Any comments about that? Oh, did you know there's an Odyssey movie coming out this summer? Just thought I could give us a little, I don't know that we have sound, but I thought I'd show us a little clip of, oh, you have sound. Matt Damon. Matt Damon. Welcome back.
What if I can't?
I just want to give us the full effect of the scene. I just want us to be there with Paul, okay? Next, we're going chronologically, Jonah. So I'm throwing Jonah in there. Obviously, I'm not like calling it literature. This is scripture. But if we're going chronologically, that would be the next one. I won't read the whole thing. Maybe just together we can piece together what happened. So do you remember the cause of the storm that, so just to review real quickly, Jonah is sent by God to go preach to Nineveh. He goes on this, and please help me out if I get the details wrong, but he ends up on the ship, and he's not obeying God, and so God sends the storm, and Jonah's down under asleep, and then in the hole asleep, and maybe I should just read it because I'm really bad at summarizing it. Do you want to summarize it?
As I recall, he's told the prophecy to the people of Nineveh.
Yep.
He says, I am not doing that, certainly not. And he goes the opposite way to Joppa. Exactly. Which, are you going to talk about Moby Dick?
Yes.
Are you going to talk about Father Mapple? His sermon?
No.
There's a great, I think it's chapter 8 maybe of Moby Dick, when you have the famous Father Mapple who gives his sermon about Jonah.
Yeah.
And away he went to Joppa, which we believe is Indonesia. As far as his is a like wonderful piratical preacher. So he goes to Joppa, or he tries to, he's on the ship. There's a storm that happens.
There's a storm.
And is he tossed overboard?
Yep, so everyone's like, why is this storm happening? What God is the cause of this storm? So they're all going around being like, is it your God that caused the storm? Is it your God that caused the storm? And then they're all like, no, I'm good with my God. And then they go down to Jonah and he's like, oh, hey, sorry, it was me. It was my, they ask him, verse 8, tell us why this calamity, oh, I see, I'm not in slideshow anymore. I don't know how long it was like that. he says, where was I? Tell us why this calamity has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where do you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you? I am a Hebrew, he replied. I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land. And then the men were even more afraid. So this God that you know, he made the sea, he made the dry land. Oh my gosh, like how are we going to survive this? And so he knows, he's like, okay, just throw me overboard. Like, it's my fault, I'm so sorry. They're like, no, we don't want to throw you overboard. That like sounds really terrible, but eventually they're like, okay, well the only way we're going to survive is if we throw you overboard. And he's swallowed by a fish. So, who dies in this story?
Jonah.
Does Jonah die?
Jonah dies.
Jonah doesn't die.
Jonah is swallowed by death himself, taken down beneath the pillars of the world into the abyss, the deepest part of death. It is not Shamu. When I heard the story as a kid, I was picturing the scene in Pinocchio where he goes in the whale and like builds a fire and he's roasting hot dogs, at least in the Disney version. It's not that. This is the sea monster, right?
This is Lotan or what? Leviathan. Yeah, this is like an instrument of the enemy, right? Which the sea for the Hebrew people, for the Israelites, really is like chaos and destruction and yeah. So Jonah dies.
There's a big statue of a fish in Java.
Is there? Amazing.
Yes.
So, summary, the cause of the storm is Jonah's disobedience, and only Jonah dies, but then he comes back to life.
The only sign which you will be given is the sign of Jonah.
The sign of Jonah. Pretty cool. That's what Jonah's ship might have looked like. This is a Phoenician ship. This is actually a real ship. It's a replica that was made, and it actually sailed like around Africa and it sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, which is pretty wild that it was able to make it across the Atlantic Ocean. It's now somewhere in the Midwest, and some museum has owned by the Latter-day Saints has bought it. Yeah, interesting. That's it. I'm going to skip the Tempest because I know we do not have time for all of these things. Robinson Crusoe. The first English, I'm sure that we have some experts in the room who could tell us whether or not Robinson Crusoe is the first English novel or the first novel in English. And do we remember the story? Should I read the whole thing? Maybe we can start in the middle of it. So at this point, he is basically in a storm. He's being tossed by the waves, and so starting in the middle, the last time of these two these waves had been well nigh fatal to me, for the sea, having hurried me along as before, landed me, or rather dashed me, against a piece of rock, and that with such force it left me senseless, and indeed helpless, as to my own deliverance. For the blow taking my side and breast beat the breath as if it were quite out of my body, and had it returned again immediately, I must have been strangled in the water. But I recovered a little before the return of the waves, and seeing I should be covered again with the water, I resolved to hold fast by a piece of the rock, so he's being battered by these waves. He finally climbs onto the cliffs of the shore, sits down on the grass, free from danger and quite out of the reach of the water. He's now landed and safe on the shore, began to look up and thank God that my life was saved. And then he realizes that he's been delivered. He's contemplating at the very bottom. You can see contemplation of my deliverance, making 1,000 gestures and motions, which I cannot describe, reflecting upon all my comrades that were drowned, and that there should not be one soul saved but myself. But as for them, I never saw them afterwards or any sign of them, except 3 of their hats, 1 cap, and 2 shoes that were not fellows. Very sad. Do we remember what's the cause of this storm that causes Robinson Crusoe's ship to sink? Do we know? I think that this is earlier in the book. He says, my ill fate pushed me on, now with an obstinacy that nothing could resist. He I'll keep reading it. I'm trying to rush, but I'll just read it all. And though I had several times loud calls from my reason and my more composed judgment to go home, this is kind of like a prodigal son kind of thing, yet I had no power to do it. He has like fled his home. He's not going home. I know not what to call this, nor what will I urge that it is secret overruling decree that hurries us on to be the instruments of our own destruction. So I think the cause for Robinson Crusoe of this storm, it's just the weather, but also perhaps, like, according to the narrative, it's, he's the instrument of his own destruction. So perhaps his disobedience. And who dies in Robinson Crusoe? Or who survives? He does. And his vessel is destroyed. Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Okay, so we've made it to, of course, Robinson Crusoe is written in like 1719. We've made it to 1759, and the chronometer has been invented, which means that people are able to go much further than they were before. So the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner is written in 1834. So they are able to go like all the way to the South Pole, which is where this is set.
When did people stop believing in that they would sail off the end of the earth?
Good question. I don't know off the top of my head.
They never did. Still flat earth people.
We still have.
Yeah, certainly the Greeks knew that the world was round. The question was how big it was. Columbus thought that it was a smaller circumference. He was wrong. It turned out there was stuff in the.
So 1834, we've got the sextant, we've got precise celestial navigation. They have made it all the way south. They're in this, this is Gothic literature, so it's like, dark and we'll hear it. So he has killed an albatross. The albatross is this giant bird that can go thousands of miles, and when you're like in the middle of the ocean and you are far away from land and you see the albatross, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, because this is the only sign of life that I can see for, other than the marine animals. And so it's like this sign of good luck, I think. But he kills the albatross. We don't know why. This is what happens. And I had done a hellish thing, and it would work 'em woe. For all averred, I had killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Ah, wretch, said they, the bird to slay that made the breeze to blow. I'm gonna skip. Day after day, we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. The very deep did rot, O Christ, that ever this should be. Yea, slimy things did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. I just love that so much. So what causes, is there a storm in this story? There's not really a storm in this one.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
Very calm.
Yeah, exactly. It's so calm, it's like really eerie. Who dies? I didn't read this part. The albatross, that's right. Later on, everyone dies except the narrator. And then they're all like reanimated and come to life, and you've got these like skeletons sailing the ship. And then the vessel survives. Okay, trying to get through all these guys. Moby Dick. I think we can all together figure out Moby Dick, right? Do we know Moby Dick well enough? So we're in the peak of the age of sail. And who survives? Ishmael. Only Ishmael survives. Everyone else dies. What is the relationship between the captain and the crew like?
Strained.
Very strained, to say the least. Captain Ahab. I mean, I picked this one because it shows you that. So they are in a storm, and they're, Starbuck, the first mate, is like, we must send down the main topsail yard, sir. The band is working loose. And Captain Ahab was like, strike nothing, lash it. If I had sky sail poles, I'd sway them up now. So he's doing the opposite of what the crew is telling them they need to do. Sir, in God's name, sir. Well, the anchors are working, sir. Shall I get them inboard? Strike nothing and stir nothing, but lash everything. So he's just doing the opposite. Do you think he's a good captain? All right, keep moving. And then finally, our modern day. So Life of Pi was made into a movie. Does anyone read the book Life of Pi? Yeah. Saw the play. Yeah, it's been made. Saw all kinds of things. He's on a ship with his family moving from India to North America, and it's a ship transporting zoo animals. That sank. So Pi ends up on a lifeboat with a tiger, and ends up surviving. But then I'm just gonna, if you haven't read it by now or haven't seen the movie, I'm just gonna ruin it for you. So in the end, we learn that it might have been a fictional story, and it's really kind of an allegory for him being stuck on a boat with a couple other people who didn't survive, and there's kind of a suggestion of some pretty terrible things that people do to each other in order to survive out on the open ocean. So who dies in Life of Pi?
Everybody but Pi and the tiger.
Everybody but Pi and the tiger. Yep, his family, everyone on the ship, etc. And the cause of the storm is, the cause of the boat sinking is just kind of the storm. Okay, I made it through all of our literature. We can go back to the Bible now. I'm hoping that this will help us see the story, give us some context for the story, or some extra stuff. Okay, trying to get back to the next slide. All right, yes.
Are you suggesting that Paul made up his journey?
No.
His fictional journey?
No, that's far from what I'm suggesting. What I'm hoping to do in offering all this literary stuff is asking some questions about what happens in these stories and comparing the stories, but not at all saying that this was a fictional story. Thank you for that clarification. Okay, so back to real life. When a moderate south wind began to blow, they thought they could achieve their purpose. So they weighed anchor and began to sail past Crete, close to the shore. But soon a violent wind, called the northeaster, rushed down from Crete. Since the ship was caught and could not be turned head-on into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven. So, by running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. After hoisting it up, they took measures to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run on the Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and so were driven. So the ship is caught, and they're afraid that they're going to be driven down towards Libya, where there are these sandbanks, and so they don't want to be driven down towards Libya. And they use the sea anchor, which is not, the image there is like a modern sea anchor. Essentially, it just would have been something heavy to keep the ship from being tossed one way or another. We were being pounded by the storm so violently that on the next day, they began to throw the cargo overboard. And on the third day, with their own hands, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. So the ship's tackle is essentially all of the sails, the ropes, all that kind of stuff. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest raged, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. So here we are finally, all of these stories that I've kind of offered up, like now here we are, we're in this, Paul and his shipmates are in this situation where there is no hope of being saved. They are out on the ocean. They have thrown all of the ways that they can sail this and steer this boat. They are just at the mercy of God. They are completely alone and at the mercy of God. Paul then stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided this damage and loss. I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For last night there stood by me an angel of the God, to whom I belong and whom I worship, and he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before the emperor, and indeed, God has granted safety to all those who are sailing with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we will have to run aground on some island.'" So how does this compare to some of the stories that I covered?
Salvation story. It's saved instead of anything else. All is being saved.
All is being saved. We're going to be saved. Does anyone have in these other stories? Does anyone seem to have such confidence or clarity? How can Paul have such clarity that they're all going to be safe?
Listen to the Holy Spirit, so I guess he has some.
So, it's pretty striking how different it is, I think, from all of these other stories where, they're worried about, being subject to the wind and the waves and everything. And Paul is just calm and courageous. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
And Paul has become the captain here. There's a sense of community here. He creates a community. He is the enslaved, and he becomes the effective captain.
Exactly. He really, he seems to be taking on the role of captain and the leader in this moment.
But he has to command it, and they have to throw everything overboard.
They have to throw everything overboard in order to not be sunk by the storm. And it'll get even worse. So when the 14th night had come, so 14 days, 2 weeks, not knowing at all where you're going, having no sense of where you are, you don't have any of these instruments, you're just floating around, you don't know where you're going to end up. You can see the path that they took on the 14th night. As we were drifting across the Sea of Adria, about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. So they took soundings and found 20 fathoms. A little farther on, they took soundings again and found 15 fathoms. So they're basically just measuring down to the bottom of the seafloor to see how deep the water is, to see how close they are to land. Fearing that we might run on the rocks. So now, of course, it's so ironic because you've made it through, you're finally near land. And as we kind of saw, like Robinson Crusoe and all these other, like getting to land is just as dangerous. Like landing the ship is just as dangerous as like, you can be so close and yet so far away. So they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come, so they're keeping themselves from getting too close to the shore. But when the sailors tried to escape from the ship and had lowered the boat into the sea on the pretext of putting out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved." And the soldiers cut away the ropes of the boat and set it adrift. So what's happening there?
The rats are abandoning the ship.
Yeah, people are like, let's get away from this thing. But that's interesting that Paul says, unless you stay in the ship, you can't be saved. Why would he say that?
Well, there's a community that's being formed on the ship. So you leave the community, you will die.
Yeah, and perhaps even more so. I mean, he knows, like, God has been with him, and he knows that, like, if you stay here, God's presence is here. If you leave this ship, if you leave the safety of the ship, like, you're leaving the presence of God, the safety of God.
It seems like they're kind of sort of resonances with the story of the Ark, you know?
Mm-hmm.
The Ark is the sort of holy space in which, like, God's creation is preserved from the waters. And I also think about, like, if you leave this ship, you will not be saved. Like the part of the church that we worship in is called the nave in Latin. It's the ship, and so it looks like the sort of interior of an upside down ship. And there were even churches built. I think it may have been. I'm sure there's. Wendy probably knows this, but I think Alberti finds, and with some other kind of luminaries of the Italian Renaissance, finds this complete ship in an Italian lake, and it's a Roman ship, and they start building churches kind of based on the way the boards are joined there. So, like, you have the kind of part of the church called the ship, and then the architecture starts actually echoing naval architecture, but I think there is this kind of like Ark of Salvation, this kind of ship amid the waters of the kind of selfishness and fear and anger and all the things that are so prevalent in the world, this kind of place of peace and safety from all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I thought about including the Noah's Ark, and I knew that I was not going to have enough time for that today. And so the soldiers have cut away the ropes of essentially the lifeboat. So now they've cut away, they've gotten rid of the tackle. Now the lifeboat is cut away. They're safe, but it seems like they're getting rid of the things that will keep them safe. It's like they're having to throw away the things that generally you would want. Yes?
The centurion believed it and acted on it, and the sailors did not. There's another instance of the crucifixion of the centurion, recognized it. And another instance when he's about to be tortured, where the centurion accepts that he's a Roman citizen without any fault at all about it. Where's your passport? None of that.
That's right.
Now I wonder about that. Is it that they were reduced to authority, that they sensed his authority, which must have been enormous. I mean, he was transforming the world. The sailors were less disciplined. I don't know. I have no idea. But it's kind of remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, they threw away the things that, in their own minds, were material to save them. They threw them away.
Yep.
We got a better captain.
This is really cool. Just before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food, saying, "Today is the 14th day you have been in suspense and remaining without food, having eaten nothing. Therefore I urge you to take some food, for it will help you survive, for none of you will lose a hair from your heads." So generally, again, when you're in these terrible, life-threatening situations, the last thing a good captain might suggest that people, eat and nourish themselves before before taking the next difficult step. Maybe that's what Paul is thinking about. But it's also this sense of like abundance and safety and calm amidst real scary circumstances. After he had said this, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. That sounds pretty familiar.
Yeah.
Definitely some Eucharistic overtones there. Then all of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. We were in all 276 persons in the ship. A lot of people. After they had satisfied their hunger, they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the sea. So now the stores, the wheat, this is why we think it's a grain ship. So now they've let the grain out into the sea. They're just dropping everything. They nourish themselves, and now they're dropping even more.
The little picture that you showed of the boat before would not carry that many people.
Well, it might be deceptive, and also it might not be the right model, In the morning, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach, on which they planned to run the ship ashore if they could. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea, throwing more out. So anchors. At the same time, they loosened the ropes that tied the steering oars, then hoisting the foresail to the wind, they made for the beach. But striking a reef, they ran the ship aground. The bow stuck and remained immovable, but the stern was being broken up by the force of the waves. Pausing there, these anchors that you see to the right, these are first century Roman anchors that were found off the coast of Malta. Pretty cool. Was it from Paul's ship? I don't know. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none might swim away and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, again, the centurion looking out for Paul, kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, and the rest to follow, some on planks and others on pieces of ship. And so it was that all were brought safely to land. After we had reached safety, then we learned that the island was called Malta. So who survives in this story? What caused the storm?
Winter.
Their disobedience to Paul.
Yeah.
It didn't cause it, but that's why they...
No albatross? No sun god?
No Zeus.
No Zeus?
They failed to follow Paul's advice and stay where they were.
Right.
It's very Job-like in a way. I mean, I don't know if this was a trope of like one thing after another. It just keeps bad happening, I don't know if that was sort of a literary form.
Yeah. What happened to the ship? Gone. Yeah.
Did they land where they needed to be? Or did they have to?
Well, they're closer to Rome. I mean, they made it all the way across the Mediterranean. I'll go back to the very first one. So you can see from Crete to Malta, which is just off the southern coast of Sicily, they made it a lot further. They went the right direction. But they're not.
They had to get into another boat to get across.
Yeah, they were on a separate boat from Myra onwards. So hopefully it didn't confuse you more than help you in offering all that those literary asides. But I mean, the point that I'm trying to make is, or that I'm seeing, is that in all these other stories, think about how dangerous seafaring is and how many people die and just like how hard and difficult it is. And compare those stories with the story of Paul on the ship and how authoritative he is and how well he leads people and how even in really difficult circumstances, like God is with him. And just like pretty miraculous that is. Any closing thoughts?
I love that. That's so cool. What a wonderful way to contextualize this throughout the history of seafaring literature. It's fantastic. It makes it so vivid because I mean, we've all heard these stories and read these stories a million times. And so I think for me, it's really helpful to kind of think not in terms of just like, okay, then they went there, then they went there, then they got bit by a snake or whatever, but really like thinking about what it's like to be in the sea air and falling into salt water and having to cast the tackle overboard and what that means. It made it very vivid. I love that. Thank you.
Especially the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Especially the Odyssey part.
Yeah.
You think they really had 200 people on that little ship?
That's what Sally's asking too.
It struck me as odd.
Yeah.
You need like a matchbox in there for scale. Maybe it was gargantuan,
Yeah.
You need to suspend your disbelief. Again.
If anything, it's a wrong model. I don't think it's the wrong number of people. Yeah. Did you have a comment, George?
Well, it strikes me that within the shell of what could be a traditional trope, whether it's a shipwreck, what's really important is not whether it's in place or not, but what's made of it. In each of these cases that you talked about, there's a different story, if you want to say that, or there's a set of occurrences that shipwreck produces. So living within this traditional, perhaps, kind of trope, you have completely different stories, completely different moral objectives and kind of observations that you can take away from that story. I say this particularly because Adam Gothic, in the article in the New Yorker that he wrote about Paul, makes the point, one of his points is that Acts is completely a fictionalized account because it uses traditional motifs like shipwrecks, adventures.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
And I think what you've suggested to us, bringing up the whole question of traditional kind of trope, is that what happens within that shell is really perhaps what we are talking about. It's a way of looking at different types.
Yeah, it's interesting. And he sort of takes this idea of lots of imprisonments, multiple shipwrecks, as just this sign of radical improbability.
Yes.
But it's a funny way of feeling certain about history, If in 2,000 years someone said, yeah, there was this guy who was like the American ambassador to France, and he made all these amazing discoveries about electricity, and he started the Philadelphia Public Library system, and he did all these amazing things. You'd think, well, that person never existed. There's no actual Benjamin Franklin. Like there's a lot of different people, a lot of different texts written by different authors that all sort of go into like creating this myth of Benjamin Franklin. But in fact, there was a guy, Benjamin Franklin, who did all these things and wrote Poor Richard's Almanac and all this stuff. So it seems insane to me. It's not the way to do history. And I think one thing I take away from your presentation is just thinking about what a sort of common experience in big swaths of humanity, the dangers of the sea have been for the last 4,000 years of human experience. I mean, we don't think twice about flying somewhere for vacation, but for basically all of human history
and continuing
before
human history.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I did Life of Pi, because it's still like, I mean, even with all the technology we have, if things go wrong and you end up, out in the middle of the ocean, you're still going to be in the same situation as Odysseus was.
It's crazy. So interesting.
Mm-hmm. But it's also a way to talk about heroism, or strength of character, or what does it take in those really hard circumstances to survive.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And isn't it the case that because Paul survives, he attributed it to God, or God was there because he survived? I'm not saying that. If he had gone down with the ship.
He was there because God was telling him that you're headed to Rome, and so he was there because of God, and God was also, I lost my train of thought, but yeah.
It seems to me that God is there because he survived. If he had gone down, he might have been abandoned.
Penny.
This is just a detail, but I think every time they express the number of people that were someplace, and they want to emphasize it, and they make it a large number, because it's just saying there were a lot of people there, sick, and then nobody knows what a lot is. But if they say 500 people, you say, now that's a lot. And so you keep, so I think we give too much credence to the exactness of the number of people that are present.
Numbers in the Bible are symbolic, and it's probably a pretty good way to take it. They stand for something big and a lot. So the point is told that there are exactly 276 people instead of 275. There is a meaning in there.
I'm sure someone has found the meeting somewhere. Well, thank you for accompanying me on this jaunt through. I didn't even use my pilot voice that I've been practicing with my children. Thank you.
Please go up and take some of the food home. We
It's a lot.
leftovers or